His simple favor for two Apache girls led to a full Apache patrol surrounding his home. It was a quiet afternoon when John, a middle-aged man who lived alone at the edge of a small desert town, was sitting on the porch of his modest home. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the dusty landscape in soft shades of orange and gold. A gentle breeze moved through the dry scrub and small cacti around his property, carrying with it the faint smell of sage and earth. John often enjoyed these quiet moments, away from the noise of the town and the fast pace of life. His home, a simple one-story house with a small garden and a wooden fence, had always been a place of peace for him. He sipped slowly from his cup of coffee, enjoying the warmth against the coolness of the late afternoon air. Birds chirped softly in the distance, and a few lizards darted between rocks, their movements quick and careful. Life had been simple for John for many years, and he liked it that way. His days were usually filled with small tasks around the house, reading old books, and sometimes helping neighbors with small favors. He liked knowing that even a small gesture could make someone's day easier or brighter. As he leaned back in his chair, enjoying the calm, he noticed movement near the gate. At first, he thought it might be a stray dog or a neighbor's child, but as he focused, he realized it was two young girls walking together. They looked about 10 or 11 years old, moving lightly over the dusty ground. Their long hair was braided neatly, and they wore simple but colorful clothes that stood out against the muted desert background. John immediately noticed their bright eyes and the curious expressions on their faces. The girls approached the gate slowly, not wanting to startle him. One of them stepped forward and spoke politely. "Excuse us, sir," she said softly. "Could you please help us with something?" Her voice was gentle but firm, showing that she was used to speaking respectfully to adults. The other girl nodded behind her, clutching a small bundle of cloth tightly in her hands. John smiled, lowering his cup. "Of course," he replied warmly. "What can I do for you?" The girls exchanged quick glances before the first one spoke again. "We need some water and some help carrying our supplies to the hill nearby." "It's not far, but it's a little heavy for us." John felt a small pang of concern for them, realizing that children this young shouldn't be struggling with heavy loads. He gestured for them to come inside. "Come on in." "I can help you," he said. The girls hesitated for a moment but then stepped through the gate cautiously, clearly relieved that he had agreed. John walked to the kitchen and filled 2 small water bottles from the tap. The cool water sparkled in the sunlight as he handed them to the girls, who thanked him politely. He noticed the way their eyes sparkled as they drank, the way they looked around his home with interest and curiosity. It reminded him of his own childhood, when he would explore the world with a similar mix of wonder and caution. Once they had finished drinking, John suggested they rest for a few minutes before starting the walk to the hill. He could see that the girls were eager but also tired, so he decided to make them comfortable. They sat on the small porch, talking quietly to each other in their native language, though occasionally one of them would look at John and smile, saying a word or two in English. He listened politely, understanding that he didn't need to know everything to be kind. As he prepared to help them carry the bundle of supplies, John felt a sense of satisfaction. Helping others, even in small ways, was something he valued deeply. He had grown up in a community where neighbors looked out for one another, and though he now lived a quieter life, those values remained strong within him. He admired the girls' politeness and the way they treated each other with care, as if they had a bond that made them both stronger. The sun was beginning to dip lower, casting long shadows across the yard, when John finally took the bundle in his hands. It was heavier than he expected, but manageable. The girls walked alongside him, chattering quietly about the things they had seen that day. They spoke of small adventures, of flowers and birds, and of the simple joys that children often notice but adults forget. John listened, smiling at their stories, feeling a warmth in his chest that came from seeing innocence and curiosity thrive. As they walked toward the hill, John noticed the terrain changing. The flat desert slowly gave way to rocky slopes with patches of grass and wild flowers scattered among the stones. He took care with each step, making sure the girls were safe and steady. Occasionally, he pointed out interesting rocks or small plants, enjoying the chance to share knowledge and experience with them. The girls listened attentively, their eyes wide with fascination at every new discovery. They reached a small plateau near the top of the hill, where the view of the surrounding desert was breathtaking. John paused, letting the girls set down the bundle. The wind blew gently, and the sky above turned shades of pink and purple as the sun continued its slow descent. The girls laughed softly, running a few steps ahead to explore the rocks and small shrubs. John watched them carefully, his heart full of quiet happiness. He realized that moments like these, simple and unassuming, were sometimes the most meaningful in life. After a few minutes, the girls returned to him, smiling and thanking him again for his help. John smiled back, feeling proud that he had made their task easier and more enjoyable. "It's nothing," he said. "I'm glad I could help. You're very kind to ask politely, and that makes all the difference." The girls nodded, clearly appreciating his words, and one of them offered a small handmade bracelet as a token of thanks. John accepted it with warmth, understanding that gestures like this carried meaning far beyond their size or value. Little did John know, this simple act of kindness, a favor that seemed small and ordinary in the moment, was about to grow into something much larger. At that time, he could not have imagined that word of this encounter would travel quickly through the community, reaching ears that were concerned for the girls' safety. What had begun as a quiet afternoon of helping two children would soon become a situation that required patience, understanding, and careful communication. For now, though, John and the girls enjoyed the quiet beauty of the hill, the soft wind, and the slowly darkening sky. He felt a connection to these children, not just because he was helping them, but because they reminded him of the values he had always held dear: kindness, respect, and a willingness to lend a hand without expecting anything in return. It was a feeling that grounded him, that reminded him of the good that existed in everyday life, and that small acts could ripple outward in unexpected ways. As they finally began the walk back down the hill, the girls chatting happily and John carrying the lighter bundle, there was a sense of harmony in the air. The desert around them seemed calm, almost protective, and the sun's final rays lit the landscape in golden light. John felt a sense of quiet accomplishment, unaware that his simple favor was about to attract attention he had never anticipated. By the time they reached his home again, the shadows had grown long, and the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The girls thanked him once more and waved as they walked away toward their village. John watched them go, feeling a strange mix of contentment and curiosity about what would happen next. He thought about the power of small gestures and how sometimes even the simplest act of helping someone could create consequences far beyond one's imagination. Little did he know that in the hours to come, his home would be surrounded by a careful and protective patrol, not because of any wrongdoing, but because of the love and concern a community felt for its young ones. But in this moment, John only felt peace. He had helped, he had connected, and he had acted with kindness, and sometimes, he thought, that was enough. And so the quiet afternoon ended, the desert calm once more, but the seeds of an unexpected adventure had already been planted. John returned to his porch, sipped the last of his coffee, and watched the sky darken into night, unaware of the surprising lessons and encounters that awaited him. It was a day that began simply, with a favor offered to two children, and it was a day that would soon change in ways he could not yet imagine. After John helped the two Apache girls and watched them disappear down the dusty path toward their village, he returned to his quiet home, feeling satisfied. The sun had dipped fully below the horizon, leaving a gentle twilight that made the desert feel calm and peaceful. Crickets chirped in the background, and a soft breeze rustled the sparse leaves of the trees near his porch. John leaned back in his chair, thinking about the day, the girls' polite smiles, and the way they had laughed together on the hill. He had no reason to suspect that the simple favor he had offered would cause any trouble. Helping people, especially children, was something he did often, and he had never faced any problem because of it. Yet, as he sipped his tea and listened to the quiet sounds of the desert night, a sense of unease began to creep in. He couldn't quite explain it at first. Perhaps it was just the loneliness of the desert, or the way shadows stretched across the yard in the fading light. But deep down, he had a feeling that this evening might not be as simple as it had started. Back in the village, the two girls walked quickly toward home, their bundle of supplies clutched tightly between them. They were excited to have completed the task with John's help and wanted to share the story with their family. They spoke in soft, hurried tones, their words flowing in their native language. They described how John had been kind, how he had offered water and carried the supplies, and how he had talked to them about the desert and the plants along the path. Their laughter and excitement were clear, and for a moment the walk home felt light and joyful. However, when they arrived at the edge of the village, one of the older relatives noticed them. This relative, a cousin of the girls, had been keeping an eye on the area while they were gone, and immediately felt concern. "Where have you been?" the older relative asked, their voice filled with worry. The girls explained everything carefully, their voices small and earnest, but the relative's concern did not fade. In their mind, strangers were not always safe, and it was their responsibility to make sure the children had not been harmed. Word of the encounter spread quickly through the community. One person mentioned that the girls had been seen with a man from outside the village. Another added that the man had been polite and helpful, carrying their supplies and offering water. Still, the initial fear remained. Safety, especially for children, was a priority, and the community took this responsibility very seriously. People began talking quietly among themselves, and soon a plan started to form. It was not a plan born of anger, but of protection. The village elders, aware of the situation, decided that a patrol would be organized, not as a punishment, but as a way to ensure the girls' safety. Meanwhile, John had returned to his routine, unaware of the growing concern. He cleaned up the small mess left by the girls on his porch, set the water bottles back in the kitchen, and began to read one of his favorite books. The desert night was quiet, almost too quiet, and he occasionally glanced out the window, half expecting to see a stray animal or a wandering neighbor. Everything seemed peaceful, and he allowed himself to relax once again. Suddenly, movement caught his eye. From the corner of his porch he noticed figures approaching along the path leading to his home. At first he thought it might be the girls returning, but as the figures drew closer, he realized they were older and moving with purpose. They were not running, but they walked quickly, their eyes alert and focused. John's heart began to beat a little faster, and a small feeling of unease settled in his chest. He stepped closer to the window to see more clearly, his curiosity mingled with a growing sense of concern. It became clear that this was not just a few individuals. It was a group. They were organized, moving in a careful, deliberate manner, circling around his home as if they knew the terrain well. The moonlight illuminated their faces and the edges of the blankets and robes they wore, giving them a sense of purpose and seriousness. John realized with a mixture of surprise and apprehension that these people were likely from the Apache community he had interacted with earlier. His mind raced, trying to remember every detail of his encounter with the girls. Had he done something wrong? Had he offended anyone without realizing it? As the figures came closer, John decided it was best to remain calm and stay outside in view. He stepped out onto the porch, raising his hand slightly in a gesture of peace. "Hello," he called softly. "I don't mean any harm. I was just helping the girls with their supplies. They're safe, I promise." His voice was calm but carried enough authority to show he was not afraid, only cautious. The patrol stopped for a moment, their movements careful but observant. One of the adults, clearly a leader among them, stepped forward. "We heard the girls were with you," the leader said, his voice steady but firm. "We need to make sure they are safe." "Can you tell us what happened?" John nodded, beginning to recount the events of the afternoon in as clear and honest a way as possible. He explained how the girls had asked for water, how he had carried their supplies, and how they had spoken to him about the plants and rocks on the hill. The leader listened carefully, his eyes never leaving John. Other members of the patrol nodded quietly, showing that they were paying attention and considering every word. John noticed that their expressions were serious but not angry. They were protective, cautious, and determined to ensure the girls' well-being. He felt a sense of relief that they were listening, and he continued to speak honestly and respectfully, hoping to show that his intentions had been good and that nothing improper had occurred. As the conversation continued, the patrol members asked questions about the girls' behavior, the path they had taken, and John's own background. They were thorough but not aggressive, their goal clearly to gather information and ensure safety rather than to punish or confront. John answered every question patiently, realizing that this was not a moment of conflict, but a moment of learning and understanding. He began to understand the seriousness with which the community protected its young ones and the responsibility they felt toward each other. Time passed slowly as the discussion continued. The patrol moved carefully around his home, scanning the area, but always maintaining a respectful distance. Jean could see that they were experienced, knowing how to navigate the land and how to observe without causing unnecessary alarm. The night air was cool and filled with the sounds of the desert, crickets, distant owls, and the occasional rustle of a small animal in the brush. It was tense, yet strangely peaceful in its own way. Eventually, the patrol began to relax slightly, their movements becoming less rigid as they listened to John and observed that nothing was out of place. One of the adults finally nodded and spoke. "We see that the girls are safe and that you have helped them. Thank you for being honest with us." The tension in the air began to ease, though the sense of caution remained. John nodded in return, feeling a mix of relief and respect for the careful attention the community had paid to the situation. He realized then that what had started as a simple act of kindness had grown into something much larger. Helping the girls had unintentionally triggered a chain of events that highlighted the importance of communication, trust, and cultural understanding. John felt grateful for the patience and respect shown by the patrol, and he recognized that his own calm and honest approach had been essential in resolving the tension.
After a while, the patrol members began to withdraw, their movements deliberate as they returned to their village.
They had completed their task of ensuring the girls' safety and had confirmed that John's intentions had been good. John watched them leave, feeling a deep sense of relief and a newfound appreciation for the values of the Apache community. He understood that their actions, though initially surprising, were driven by love, protection, and responsibility. As the night grew darker, John returned to his porch once more, reflecting on the events of the evening. He thought about the girls, their curiosity, and their trust in him. He thought about the patrol, their seriousness, and their careful attention to detail. And he thought about himself, realizing that even a small favor could have far-reaching effects when it intersected with the concerns and traditions of a community. In the quiet of his home, John made a mental note to always approach situations with respect, patience, and honesty. He realized that understanding the perspectives of others, especially when cultural differences were involved, was just as important as any act of kindness. And though he had never anticipated that a simple favor for two young girls would lead to a full patrol surrounding his home, he was grateful for the experience. It had taught him lessons about trust, communication, and the value of acting with good intentions. That night, as he finally prepared to go to bed, the desert seemed calm once more. Stars dotted the sky like scattered diamonds, and the moon cast a gentle light over his home. John knew that the events of the evening would remain in his memory for a long time. He had started the day expecting nothing more than a quiet afternoon, and yet he had witnessed the power of care, protection, and community. The patrol had come and gone, but the lessons they left behind would stay with him forever. He fell asleep that night with a sense of gratitude and quiet reflection, aware that tomorrow might bring new surprises, but confident that honesty, respect, and kindness would guide him through whatever challenges lay ahead. The next morning, John awoke to the warm light of the desert sun spilling across his porch. Birds chirped cheerfully, and the faint scent of sage drifted on the breeze. He stretched and yawned, feeling refreshed from a good night's sleep. The events of the previous evening still lingered in his mind. The visit from the two girls, their polite smiles, and, most notably, the unexpected patrol that had come to ensure their safety. At the time it had been confusing, even frightening, but now he reflected on it with a sense of understanding and respect. John had always known that the desert was a place where life moved at its own pace. People respected each other, communities were close-knit, and traditions were valued deeply. Still, he realized that even in such a quiet life, surprises could arrive without warning. He poured himself a cup of coffee and stepped onto the porch, glancing at the dusty path leading away from his home. Everything seemed calm and ordinary, yet there was a lingering sense of anticipation in the air. He had just begun to settle into the morning when he noticed something unusual. Movement flickered at the edge of his property, subtle at first, but unmistakable. Shadows shifted near the fence, and he saw figures carefully navigating the terrain beyond his garden. At first he thought it might be some local workers or neighbors passing by, but as the shapes became clearer, he realized they were more organized. There were several adults moving with deliberate steps, scanning the area carefully, as if they had a purpose that required both attention and patience. John's heart began to beat faster. He immediately remembered the patrol from the previous night, and a quiet sense of dread filled him. Had something happened while he slept? Were the girls in danger? He quickly stepped out onto the porch, trying to assess the situation without startling anyone. His hands were slightly raised, a natural gesture of peace. "Hello," he called softly, hoping to make his presence known without seeming threatening. Footnote: the figures paused. From the way they moved, John could tell they were aware of him but were cautious, approaching slowly while maintaining a formation that kept them evenly spaced. Their eyes scanned the ground, the fences, and the horizon beyond, careful not to miss anything. He realized that this was not a casual visit. This was a coordinated patrol. His chest tightened slightly, but he reminded himself to stay calm. He had no reason to fear. He had acted with honesty and kindness, and he would need those qualities now more than ever. As the group drew closer, John could see their faces more clearly. The adults were focused, but not angry. Their expressions were serious, showing concern and determination rather than hostility. Some carried small packs, while others held walking sticks to help navigate the rocky terrain. Each step they took seemed calculated and deliberate, revealing that they were experienced in moving carefully and with purpose. John felt a mix of curiosity and respect. It was clear that this was a community that took its responsibilities seriously. The leader of the patrol, a tall man with sharp eyes and a calm but commanding presence, stepped forward. His gaze met John's, and there was an unspoken question in the way he looked. "Are you safe? Are the girls safe?" John nodded immediately, understanding the intent behind the silent inquiry. "Yes," he replied sincerely. "The girls are safe. I helped them yesterday, and nothing harmful happened. They returned to their families safely." The leader nodded slightly but did not relax entirely. The rest of the group began to circle John's home slowly, ensuring that there were no unexpected surprises in the surrounding area. John noticed that their movements were precise. They worked together seamlessly, communicating with small gestures and quiet words. It became clear to him that this was not a confrontation but a careful protective measure. The patrol was ensuring that everyone, including him and the children, remained safe. John took a deep breath, realizing that the situation required both patience and honesty. He stepped further onto the porch and gestured for the group to come closer. "Please," he said gently. "I am happy to answer any questions or show you anything you need." "I want you to know that I only meant to help the girls. Nothing else happened and they are unharmed." The leader stepped even closer and asked, "Can you tell us exactly what happened yesterday? We want to understand the full story." John began to recount the events carefully, starting from the moment the girls had appeared at his gate. He described how they had asked for water, how he had carried their supplies, and how they had talked about the hill and the desert around them. He explained how they had laughed, how he had guided them safely, and how he had returned them to the edge of their village. The patrol listened intently. Their eyes never left him, their movements cautious but attentive. John could feel the weight of their responsibility in the way they observed him, each person aware of their role in ensuring the children's safety. Questions were asked, simple but precise, about the girls' behavior, the path they had taken, and the exact time they had arrived and departed. John answered every question honestly, realizing that his calm, transparent approach was the only way to earn their trust. As he spoke, John noticed subtle gestures among the group, a nod here, a glance there, that indicated they were processing the information carefully. They were not judging him, but evaluating the situation in a way that demonstrated care and thoroughness. He felt a growing respect for their methodical approach, understanding that their community valued responsibility above all else, especially when it came to children. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the yard. The patrol moved in a pattern that allowed them to cover every angle of the property while keeping John within view. He noticed how they used natural cover, stepping lightly over rocks and plants, as though practicing a skill that had been passed down for generations. Their movement was almost silent, blending with the sounds of the desert, the whisper of the wind, the occasional rustle of small animals, and the distant call of birds. At one point, the leader approached John again, his expression calm but serious. "We need to make sure everything is safe," he said. "We are not here to harm you. We just need to ensure the children are protected. Can you understand why we are cautious?" John nodded immediately. "Yes," he replied. "I understand completely. Your concern is only natural, and I respect that. I am happy to cooperate in any way that helps ensure the girls are safe." The leader's expression softened slightly. He motioned to the rest of the patrol, and a few members stepped closer to John's porch, asking polite questions about his home, the area around it, and the path the girls had taken. John answered everything clearly, pointing out rocks, bushes, and small landmarks. He realized that they were mapping the situation in their minds not as a threat, but to understand and ensure security. Time passed slowly, but John remained calm and respectful. He understood that this was part of a cultural practice, a way for the community to take care of its young members. There was no anger here, only concern, and he felt a growing admiration for the discipline and care shown by the patrol. Their presence, though initially intimidating, began to feel like a protective circle, a demonstration of love and responsibility rather than conflict. By mid-morning, the patrol began to relax slightly. Their movements became less rigid, though their focus remained sharp. The leader approached John once more and spoke quietly. "We see that you have been honest and kind. That is important. We trust you have meant no harm, and we are satisfied that the girls are safe. Thank you for your cooperation." John felt a wave of relief wash over him. He nodded sincerely. "Thank you. I respect your community and your care for the children. It has been an honor to help in any way I could." Even as the tension eased, John remained aware of the seriousness of the situation. He realized that small actions, even those meant kindly, could have unexpected consequences when they intersected with the values and traditions of a community. The patrol had arrived not because of wrongdoing, but because of responsibility. They had acted decisively and carefully, ensuring that everyone involved remained safe. John reflected on the lessons of patience, respect, and clear communication that this encounter had already taught him. As the patrol began to leave, moving back toward the village in their organized formation, John felt a mixture of gratitude and relief. The desert once again seemed calm and quiet, the earlier tension replaced by a sense of order and understanding. He watched them disappear over the small hills, their presence lingering in his mind as a reminder of the care and vigilance that defined their community. John returned to his porch, poured another cup of coffee, and sat quietly. He thought about the girls, their trust in him, and the careful attention of the patrol. He realized that kindness, honesty, and respect had been his tools for navigating a delicate situation, and they had served him well. The morning had begun as any other, with a promise of peace and quiet, yet it had grown into an experience that would stay with him for a long time. A lesson in understanding, patience, and the responsibilities that come with helping others. By the time the sun reached its peak, the patrol was gone, leaving John's home surrounded only by the familiar quiet of the desert. He could see the dust settle along the path and hear the soft chirping of birds once more. Everything appeared normal again, but John knew that the events of the morning had changed him. He had witnessed firsthand the depth of care and protection within a community, and had learned that even small acts of kindness could ripple far beyond what one might expect. He spent the rest of the day tending to his home and garden, his mind often drifting back to the patrol and the two girls. Every now and then he would glance toward the path, half expecting to see them return. Even though the tension had passed, a part of him remained alert, aware that life in the desert, though peaceful, was always connected to the actions and responsibilities of the surrounding community. That day, John reflected deeply on the nature of trust, responsibility, and respect. He understood that the patrol's presence had not been a threat, but a demonstration of care, a cultural practice rooted in love and protection. He also realized that his own approach, calm, honest, and respectful, had been crucial in preventing misunderstanding. It was a lesson he would carry with him forever. Kindness must be paired with awareness and communication, especially when interacting with a close-knit community that values its traditions and its young ones. As evening fell once more, John sat on his porch watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. The wind whispered through the trees, and the desert stretched endlessly before him. He knew that his quiet life had been touched by something extraordinary, that a simple favor had grown into a situation requiring careful attention and understanding. And though the events had been tense, he felt a profound sense of gratitude for the experience, for the lessons learned, and for the community that had taught him the importance of care and vigilance. John sipped his coffee and watched as the first stars appeared, twinkling faintly in the wide desert sky. The patrol had come, done its duty and returned home, leaving behind not fear but knowledge and understanding. And in that quiet moment, John felt a deep respect for the balance between kindness, responsibility, and the traditions that shape a community. A balance that he now knew was essential in life, even in the most unexpected circumstances. John had spent the previous day reflecting on the unexpected visit from the Apache patrol. The morning had been tense, filled with careful observation and silent questioning, and even though the group had departed by mid-morning, their presence lingered in his mind. He could not stop thinking about the seriousness with which they had acted, their precision, and the care they had shown for the two girls. John knew that the patrol's visit had not been a punishment, but a protective measure. Still, he understood that the situation required careful handling if he were to maintain trust and avoid any misunderstandings in the future. That afternoon, as the sun moved high above the desert, John prepared himself to face the situation directly. He knew that the best way to resolve any tension was through clear, honest communication. He set aside the book he had been reading and walked to the gate, ensuring he appeared calm and approachable. He wanted to show respect to the patrol while also making it clear that his intentions were honorable. The desert was quiet around him, with only the faint rustle of leaves and the occasional call of a distant bird. The calmness of the surroundings contrasted with the nervous energy John felt inside. Almost as if on cue, he noticed movement at the edge of his property. The patrol was returning, this time approaching more slowly and deliberately. John stepped forward onto the porch and raised a hand in greeting. "Hello," he said warmly but respectfully.
I wanted to speak with you so that we can make sure there is no misunderstanding. I only meant to help the girls.
"They are safe, and I want to answer any questions you may have." The leader of the patrol, a tall man with a calm yet commanding presence, approached first. His eyes, sharp and careful, met John's with an intensity that was both serious and observant. "We appreciate your honesty," he said quietly. "We want to make sure the girls are safe. That is our responsibility."
Can you tell us everything that happened yesterday, step by step? John nodded, understanding the importance of providing complete transparency. He began recounting the events, starting with the moment the girls had appeared at his gate. He described how they had asked politely for water and help carrying a small bundle to the hill nearby. He explained that he had offered to help without hesitation, that he had guided them safely to the hill, and that they had enjoyed a brief walk while learning about the plants and rocks around them. He described their laughter, their careful attention to the desert terrain, and the respect they had shown for his home. John spoke slowly, clearly, and honestly, pausing occasionally to emphasize that nothing harmful had occurred. The patrol listened carefully, their eyes never leaving him. Some members exchanged subtle nods, showing that they were processing every detail. John realized that their purpose was not to accuse him, but to gather complete information to ensure the girls' safety. The leader stepped closer and asked about the return journey, the path the girls had taken back to their village, and whether they had been accompanied safely the entire way. John answered each question with patience, understanding that every word mattered in building trust. After recounting the events in full, John added, I understand your concern completely.
If I were in your place, I would want to make sure the children were safe too. I respect the care you show for your community, and I want to cooperate fully. The leader's expression softened slightly at these words, showing that he appreciated John's awareness and respect. The other patrol members also relaxed, moving more naturally around the yard, though their attention remained sharp. One of the women in the group stepped forward and asked John about his background, how long he had lived near the village, what he did for a living, and how familiar he was with the local community. John answered calmly, explaining that he had lived in the area for many years, that he valued a quiet life close to nature, and that he had always tried to help anyone in need.
He emphasized his respect for local traditions and his desire to maintain harmony with the community.
The patrol seemed to appreciate his transparency. Small nods and soft murmurs of understanding passed between the group members. John noticed the leader whisper something to one of his colleagues, who then moved to examine the path leading up the hill. They were thorough, methodical, and careful, making sure that nothing was overlooked. John realized that their approach reflected a strong sense of responsibility and discipline, and he felt a deep respect for the way they balanced caution with respect. At one point, the leader spoke again. "It is clear that your intentions were good, but it is our duty to make sure that everyone remains safe. That is why we are thorough. Can you understand why we take such care?" John nodded immediately.
Yes, I understand completely. Your duty to protect the children is admirable.
I am grateful for your guidance and patience, and I want to continue showing respect and cooperation in every way I can.
The leader's eyes softened further, and he motioned to the rest of the patrol to step closer.
Several members asked John about specific details of the afternoon, the exact location where the girls had rested, the way he had carried the bundle, and how he had ensured the girls stayed safe on the rocky hill. John described everything clearly, pointing to the landmarks he had noted during the walk. The patrol listened attentively, asking only for clarification when needed. While this conversation was taking place, John noticed that the patrol also used small gestures to communicate among themselves. A nod here, a subtle glance there. He realized that these signals were part of their careful coordination. It was not a form of secrecy or exclusion. It was a method to ensure efficiency, safety, and clarity. John admired their skill and discipline, recognizing that their coordination reflected years of experience and strong communal values. Time passed slowly as the discussion continued. John remained calm, respectful, and honest, knowing that these qualities were key to maintaining trust. Gradually, he noticed a change in the patrol's demeanor. The intensity in their eyes softened, their movements became less rigid, and they began to smile slightly when the conversation took a lighter tone. One of the younger members even commented quietly to the leader, apparently impressed by John's patience and kindness. Eventually, the leader approached John once more and spoke in a tone of finality, yet still gentle. "We are satisfied that the girls are safe and that you acted with good intentions. Your honesty and respect have shown us that you can be trusted. Thank you for your patience and cooperation." John felt a wave of relief wash over him. He nodded sincerely. "Thank you. I am grateful for your understanding and for the care you show your community. It has been an honor to work with you in ensuring the safety of the children." The patrol began to move away, still organized but now relaxed. They circled around John's property one final time, checking the perimeter for any potential hazards, then slowly made their way back toward the village. John watched them go, feeling a mixture of relief, gratitude, and deep respect. He knew that their visit had been a form of guidance as much as protection, and he reflected on the lessons he had learned about communication, honesty, and cultural awareness. As the day continued, John returned to his normal routine, tending to his home and garden while thinking deeply about the events. He realized that kindness alone was sometimes not enough. Understanding, respect, and clear communication were equally important, especially when cultural sensitivities were involved. The patrol had shown him that protection and care could be firm yet respectful, and that patience and honesty could resolve even tense situations. By evening, the desert was calm once more. The sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink, casting long shadows across the landscape. John sat on his porch sipping a cup of tea and reflecting on the experience. He thought about the girls, their trust in him, and the care shown by the patrol. He felt gratitude for having learned such important lessons firsthand, and a deep respect for the Apache community's values. He understood that his actions, while simple and well-meaning, had been observed and evaluated carefully, and that the patrol's diligence had ensured the safety of everyone involved. John realized that he had been part of something larger than himself, a demonstration of communal responsibility, cultural respect, and the protective instincts that bound a community together. As darkness fell and stars began to dot the sky, John felt a profound sense of peace. He knew that the patrol had done its duty, that the girls were safe, and that his honest, respectful communication had built trust. The experience had taught him valuable lessons about humility, understanding, and the importance of patience in complex situations. That night, John went to bed with a clear mind and a calm heart. He understood that kindness, honesty, and respect were powerful tools that could prevent misunderstanding and build bridges between individuals and communities. The events of the day had tested him, but they had also taught him the importance of acting thoughtfully and with awareness. He drifted off to sleep, feeling a sense of gratitude for the lessons learned and a quiet anticipation for the days ahead. For John, what had begun as a simple favor for two young girls had grown into a profound experience of understanding, communication, and cultural respect, a lesson that would remain with him for the rest of his life. The morning after the patrol's visit, John woke with a quiet sense of anticipation. The desert was bathed in soft golden light, and the cool breeze whispered gently through the trees and cacti surrounding his home. The events of the past few days replayed in his mind. The two young girls at his gate, the simple favor he had offered, and the unexpected arrival of the patrol. He had never imagined that helping children would lead to such an intense and eye-opening experience. Yet, despite the tension, he felt grateful for the lessons he had learned about patience, understanding, and the importance of community. John decided to step outside and inspect his property carefully. He walked along the paths, checking the garden, the fence, and the surrounding desert, ensuring everything was in order. As he did, he reflected on how easily a simple act of kindness could ripple outward, creating consequences far beyond what one might expect. Helping the girls had been a small gesture, yet it had prompted the vigilance and care of an entire community. He realized how deeply responsibility and concern for others were woven into their way of life. The village had settled back into its daily rhythm, and there was no immediate sign of the patrol. John knew, however, that their watchful presence would remain in the minds of the villagers for some time. He understood that this was not meant as a warning or a threat, but as an expression of care, an assurance that the children were safe and that the community's values were upheld. He admired this deeply, recognizing that such vigilance came from a place of love rather than fear. As he tended to his garden and small home tasks, John found himself thinking about the girls. Their trust in him, their polite manners, and their cheerful energy had left a lasting impression. He recalled the way they had walked carefully down the dusty hill, clutching their bundle, laughing softly as they shared stories of their adventures. John smiled to himself, realizing how easily innocence and curiosity could shine even in the harshest landscapes. Their simple presence had brought light into his quiet life, and he felt grateful for the unexpected joy they had shared. Midday came, and with it, a knock at the gate. John approached cautiously but without fear, and he was surprised to see one of the younger members of the patrol standing there. The boy, around 16 or 17, held a small package and smiled politely. "Sir," he said softly, "we wanted to return a small token from our village to thank you for helping the girls. Please accept it as a gesture of goodwill."
John felt a warmth in his chest as he accepted the package.
Inside was a handmade bracelet, simple but beautifully crafted, along with a small note expressing gratitude for his honesty and kindness. John thanked the young man sincerely. "This means a great deal to me," he said. "I am honored, and I will treasure it. Your community's trust is important, and I am grateful to have earned it." The boy nodded and left quietly, returning to the village. John realized that this small exchange symbolized the resolution of the situation. Trust had been built, communication had been clear, and understanding had been achieved. The tension that had weighed on him for days had lifted, replaced by a quiet sense of harmony. As the afternoon unfolded, John reflected more deeply on what had happened. He understood that the patrol's presence had been both protective and educational. It had shown him the importance of cultural sensitivity and the value of clear, honest communication. He thought about the way they had moved carefully around his property, asking questions without accusation, observing without judgment. Their actions had taught him about responsibility, vigilance, and the strength of a community that cared deeply for its members. John also reflected on his own actions. He had acted out of kindness and a desire to help, yet he realized that even the simplest gestures could be misunderstood if not approached with awareness and respect.
The experience had reminded him to always be mindful of cultural differences, to listen attentively, and to communicate openly.
He understood that his honesty, patience, and respect had been essential in turning a potentially tense situation into one of mutual understanding. As evening approached, John prepared a small meal and sat on his porch once more. The sky was painted with shades of orange, pink, and purple, and the first stars began to appear in the desert sky. He felt a deep sense of peace as he sipped his tea and watched the shadows lengthen across the landscape. The lessons of the past days had left a lasting impression on him, shaping the way he viewed his surroundings, the people in his life, and the impact of even small acts of kindness. Later that evening, John decided to write a brief note to the village elders, expressing his gratitude for their patience and understanding. He carefully described his intentions, emphasizing that he had only meant to help the children and that he respected their vigilance and care. He thanked them for demonstrating the importance of responsibility and protection within a community. He left the note at the edge of the village path, confident that it would be received with the same sincerity with which it had been written. The following morning, John awoke to the familiar calm of the desert. The air was crisp, and the sun rose in a brilliant glow that lit the rocky hills and sandy paths surrounding his home. He felt a renewed sense of connection to the land, to the people nearby, and to the lessons he had learned. The patrol had returned to their daily life. The girls were safe, and trust had been established. For John, this marked the end of a chapter that had begun with a simple favor and grown into a profound experience of understanding and mutual respect. Over the next few days, John noticed a subtle change in the atmosphere around his home. Neighbors greeted him with friendly smiles, acknowledging the bond that had formed between him and the community. He realized that trust, once earned, radiated outward, creating a sense of harmony and goodwill. Even small interactions, such as waves across the dusty road or nods of acknowledgement, now carried deeper meaning. John understood that the events of the past days had strengthened the connections between himself and the community, weaving him more tightly into the fabric of their shared life. John continued his quiet routine, tending to his garden, reading books, and enjoying the peace of his desert home. Yet he did so with a heightened awareness of the power of his actions and the responsibilities they carried. He found himself more attentive to the needs of those around him, more patient in his interactions, and more mindful of the cultural context in which he lived. Each day became an opportunity to practice kindness, honesty, and respect, building on the lessons learned from the encounter with the girls and the patrol. One afternoon, John received a visit from one of the girls. She approached hesitantly, holding a small bouquet of desert flowers. "Hello, sir," she said softly. "We wanted to thank you again for helping us. We hope you are well." John smiled warmly, feeling a rush of happiness. "Thank you," he said. "I am very well, and I am glad to see you safe and happy. Your kindness in coming to say hello means a lot to me." The girl smiled and handed him the flowers, a gesture of gratitude and friendship. John accepted them with care, placing them in a small vase on his porch where he could admire them daily. Through these simple interactions, John realized that the experience had left a lasting impact not only on him, but also on the children and their community. Trust had been established, respect had been earned, and understanding had grown. The lessons of patience, honesty, and cultural awareness had become a part of his daily life. Shaping his actions and thoughts, he understood that true kindness was not only about helping others, but also about approaching situations with awareness, humility, and respect. As days turned into weeks, John continued to reflect on the incident. He wrote down his experiences, capturing the lessons and emotions in a journal that he kept by his bedside. He wanted to remember not just the events themselves, but the insights they had brought. The importance of communication, the strength of community, and the value of protecting and caring for one another. Each entry reminded him that even small gestures could have far-reaching effects when approached with sincerity and respect. One evening, As the sun set and the desert sky glowed with deep purples and reds, John sat on his porch and looked out over the landscape. The wind carried the scent of sage, and the distant mountains stood quiet and majestic. He thought about the girls, the patrol, and the community that had welcomed him into their world with caution, care, and ultimately trust. He realized that the events of the past days had transformed not only his understanding of the community, but also his own sense of responsibility and compassion. John understood that the story of the simple favor he had offered would stay with him forever. It had begun as a small act, a gesture of kindness toward two children, yet it had become a powerful lesson in honesty, patience, respect, and cultural understanding. He had learned that even the smallest actions could ripple outward, affecting people and communities in ways that were both profound and lasting. As night fell and stars blanketed the desert sky, John felt a deep sense of contentment. He had faced uncertainty, navigated tension, and emerged with new knowledge and respect for the community around him. The girls were safe, trust had been established, and he had grown as a person, understanding the importance of thoughtfulness and awareness in every action. In the quiet of his home, John reflected on the journey that had begun with a simple favor and had ended with profound understanding. He realized that life often presented challenges in unexpected ways, and that the true measure of character was shown not in the ease of good days, but in the way one responded to moments of tension and uncertainty. He had responded with honesty, patience, and respect, and in doing so he had strengthened not only his own character, but also the bonds of trust with the community. And so, the story concluded not with conflict, but with understanding. The patrol returned to their village, the girls continued their daily lives, and John resumed his quiet routine, now enriched by the lessons of the past days. He knew that the experience would remain with him forever, a reminder that kindness, honesty, and respect could overcome fear and uncertainty, and that even a simple act could lead to lasting connections, trust, and mutual understanding. In the end, John's simple favor had not only helped the two girls but had created a bridge of trust and respect between him and the community. He had learned that patience, honesty, and awareness were as important as kindness, and that understanding the perspective of others was key to harmony. The desert around him remained calm, but the experience had left a lasting imprint on his heart, a story of care, trust, and the power of small, thoughtful actions to create meaningful change.